And hello, friends. Like Vijay was mentioning, I will try my level best to talk a little bit about data science. And the way I want to do this is very simple. నేను మరీ ఎక్కువసేపు మాట్లాడను. I will give a brief introduction. I will talk about what this space is and what are the various things in this and that sort of a thing. I'll do it for probably about half an hour or so. And then I will actually open it more for a Q&A session, because I think that's where the maximum value will come rather than me just rambling on and on about different aspects of this. Okay, so please take advantage of that. Feel free. Like I keep saying, I will not I will not harm you in any way. So you can ask me anything that you want. Right? Just feel free. Like you said, it's just a big brother type situation. It's not a very, I'm not your professor in class who's going to rank you or anything like that. Okay, so saying that, let's get into this world that we all seem to be calling data sciences nowadays. So a little bit about myself. I've been doing this for a reasonably long time now. Like I think Swati was mentioning, it's close to 25 years I've been doing this. Of course, when I started off, it wasn't called data science or anything like this. We were just statisticians or operations research people and all of that. Or machine learning researchers, and those sort of roles that we had. Now I think all of them are coming together and we're calling it data science. Yeah. Okay. So what is the goal of this talk? Like Vijay was saying, one thing that I want to do as part of this session, couple of things. One, I want to separate out the fact from fiction, right? Because in this space, there is as much misinformation as there is information around. A lot of people get confused about what exactly is data science, and we will talk a little bit about that. We'll also see what sort of different paths exist in this space today. What are the different sort of roles that you guys can play? So it's not just one thing, right? There are multiple things that you can do, and then you can figure out where you will fit or where you want to fit, right? Depending on your own interests and your own competencies. And then third and most importantly, get excited, because excitement is important. Once again, like Vijay said, I'll tell you that this is a long journey. This is a marathon, right? Becoming a data scientist is not a 100-meter sprint. You're not going to get there irrespective of whatever many coaching institutes or somebody else will tell you. You're not going to become a data scientist in 30 days, 40 days, 60 days, 90 days. It takes a lifetime, right? So it needs lifelong hard work and lifelong learning to be a good data scientist. So that's key. So excitement is key. Every morning you should feel excited. Otherwise, you will very quickly fall behind. So that's what I want to do as part of this session. Moving on. So what is data science? If I ask this question, if you kind of just go to Hyderabad city and ask this question, if you ask this question to 100 people, you will get 100 different answers today. Some people will say data science is machine learning. Some people will call it artificial intelligence. Some people will call it deep learning. Some people will call it data mining. Some people will call it visualization, reporting, analytics. You will find all of these words thrown in. The reality of it is today we are using data science as an umbrella term for all of those. But it's always better, or at least I have always found it more useful, to take a step back and look at this as the discipline of making data useful finally. Because we all have data now, and we are having more and more data every day, every week, every month. It's actually estimated that about 99% of all data was created in the last 2 years. So the rate of data growth is increasing. Now, what is really the whole field of data science is a set of tools and technologies to make the data useful. Useful for who? Useful for us humans. Useful for us to do our jobs better. Okay. So this is the other thing I want to, even at the very outset, make it very clear. Because you keep hearing this, right? Artificial intelligence will take away jobs, AI versus humans, machine learning versus humans. I don't subscribe to that view. In my view, machine learning is another set of tools and technologies that are used by humans for our own benefit. Yes, they are more sophisticated than some other tools that we were using in the past, but at the end of the day, they are still tools. Okay? At least at the present time. Was what the future holds, we don't know. The present time, they're just a set of tools. So you got to understand those tools, understand how to deploy them to make our own lives better. So understand it very simply as discipline of making data useful. This I found to be one of the best definitions. Anybody wants to say something, feel free. Okay, you don't. I'm okay. I don't mind being interrupted or something.
Srinivas, I think you can continue. I think people will take some time to warm up. So. Srinivas, we can't hear you, I think.
Yeah, can you hear me guys now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So what I was saying is, yes, let me answer that question. Is ML and data science are a part of artificial intelligence? Okay, so for part of this discussion, we will use the words machine learning and artificial intelligence synonymously, but they are truly not synonyms, right? If you look at the truest sense, machine learning is a part of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is an umbrella term for all technologies that are used or that can be used to create human level intelligence. One part of it is machine learning, which uses data driven methods to achieve that intelligence. There are other methods like hierarchical methods and network methods and connectionist methods. So there are other methods as part of AI too, but which are truly not that popular and honestly not that successful. So that's why today, when you say AI and machine learning, especially in an industry setting, you can take them as synonyms. If you get into an academic setting, then yes, they are very different terms. Data science is an umbrella term for, like I said, anything to do with data today, and to kind of make data useful. Okay, so that's kind of the umbrella term. So you can understand machine learning as a part of data science. Artificial intelligence, if we shouldn't talk about, truly speaking, as a part of data science. Yeah. So defining AI instead of AI, we should probably say defining ML here. But don't worry. For purposes of this talk, we can take them as synonyms. as synonyms, okay? Why data science became more important in these days? Once again, a good question. See, if you really think about it, data-driven approaches, okay, or a data-driven approach to build intelligent systems is nothing new. By the way, the decade that the term AI was actually coined was 1950s, 1956 actually. So it's a long time ago. But one of the reasons why these technologies are becoming more useful or more successful today is really down to two simple factors, guys. One, availability of more data. You cannot do a lot of data science if you don't have data, right? Back in the day, digital data was not so easy, right? I don't know if any of you are old enough to kind of remember analog cameras, right? Cameras with films. I don't know if any of you even remember those things. So in those days, how many digital images would you have? You know, digitizing analog images itself was very, very painful when I started work in vision in this space in my earlier days. We didn't have too much data. And secondly, the compute was not there. You know, you did not have GPUs and such sort of powerful computers. So naturally, the evolution of data-based or data-driven technologies was limited. But now it's a different world, right? Now you have a lot of data. Go to YouTube, go to Flickr, go to wherever, go to Facebook. You have digital data all over. And the compute is also risen a lot. So those are the two fundamental reasons why data science or data-driven methods are getting so popular nowadays. The algorithms always existed. Most of the algorithms are not very new. Okay, hopefully made some sense there. Roadmap of data science. I don't understand this question. We'll come back to this question a little later. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that this whole field of artificial intelligence and machine learning is not new. It's always been there. Then I think you can kind of focus your attention on the right side of the slide, right? And we'll talk about, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, there are two ways you can begin to look at it. There is something called a special purpose AI and general purpose AI, right? Special purpose AI is fundamentally saying, can it achieve a well-defined set of goals? For example, can you write an AI program to play chess? Can you write an AI program to drive a car? Can you write an AI program to, let's say, detect cancer from an MRI image, right? Can I write an AI program to actually detect if there are cats or dogs in this image, right? All of these are special purpose provisions, right? Special purpose algorithms that achieve one thing. The other part of it is what you call the general purpose AI. What is general purpose AI? It is one AI program that can do many, many things. So if you could write one AI program that could drive a car, make tea, probably give a talk on a subject, and then entertain children, and then do all of these things with only just one set of hardware and software. If there's one program with one set of hardware that can do all of this, then that is the more general purpose intelligence that we talk about. Can we achieve poorly defined, unconstrained set of goals, right? Where the goals are not really well defined, where depending on the context is, it to pick up and kind of do that. So with this, it's very, very clear, right, that the current state of AI, even though we talk a lot about AI being very, very successful in the current generation, this is known as the age of AI, really. But we are still in the special purpose only. Today, we cannot write an algorithm or a piece of AI software that can do different things at high levels of competency. So we're still in the world of special purpose, right? See, as a human today, it may be possible to write an AI algorithm that can beat me in chess. It may be possible to write an AI algorithm that can drive a car better than me. It may be possible to write an AI algorithm that can do image classification better than me. But you cannot write one AI algorithm that does all three things as well as I or you can do, right? Imagine the power of the human brain, right? It's one piece of hardware, one piece of software, but we can do all of these different things. We can actually even invent the field of machine learning itself. So we're not there yet, right? So all the things that you see in AI, so what I'm saying is understand that AI or machine learning is very, very good right now, but please understand its limitations too. Right, that's what I essentially wanted to talk about as part of this slide. So again, hope it makes sense. So we'll talk a little bit about general purpose intelligence. Okay, this is a fantastic. So if you are interested in this field, follow this guy, Andre Karpathy. He's a nice guy, and this is a game of ping pong, right? And if you actually see, the green paddle is an AI paddle. So it has learned how to play this game from looking at thousands and thousands of these games. Nobody told it the rules for this game. It just saw these games, thousands and thousands of them, and then using a technique called reinforcement learning, it actually learned how to play. And now it is unbeatable. In the game of paddle, the green one can never be beaten anymore. So it's gotten so good at it. By the way, nobody explained it, the rules. Nobody explained it that you need to move up or you move down and you have to hit the ball, nothing like that. It was just given a lot of about 200,000 Pong games, and it just learned. If you have the right loss function and if you have the right neural network architecture, today it's possible to do this. So this may be our first step to a general purpose intelligence. Of course, the only problem being that it still needs 200,000 Pong games, whereas a human child will probably need just one game and one sentence explanation, right? If you're teaching a kid who has never seen Pong how to play Pong, all that you have to tell him is, hey, you have to keep moving the paddle up or down so that you don't miss the ball, and then and the goal of the game is to never miss the ball, or at least make sure your opponent misses the ball. So that's it. 2 sentences, and you show him the game once, it's okay. The human kid will learn it. But an AI algorithm needed about 200,000 Pong games. So that tells you that it's not very efficient yet, but maybe the first step towards general intelligence. Make sense? Okay. We'll talk about the problem space, right? So if you really look at it, what type of problems are we using machine learning to solve today? If you really think about it, let's go from 3, 2, and okay, that may be a better way to do this. 3 is what we call mundane tasks, right? Tasks that you and I can do very, very well. Right? For example, like talk, like walking, like sight, like smell. All of these things, right, which are very, very easy for us, right? But which are very, very difficult for computers. It's very difficult for me to build a computer or a robot that walks as well as I do, that runs as well as you can do, that talks as well as you can do, that kind of can see as well as you can do, right? So these things, what we consider mundane tasks, where humans are naturally gifted, we can just do it. There's no big deal for us, but very, very difficult for us to build machines in this space. Now, if you look at formal tasks, right, like probably if I ask somebody what is 117 multiplied by 39, until unless there is a Sakuntala Devi in the audience, they will struggle. You'll have to take a piece of paper, pen, and calculate and tell me that. Whereas a calculator or a computer can do that pretty much immediately. It's very easy for it, right? It's very easy. we actually built a lot of computer science muscle in solving these sort of problems, right? Historically, computers have been very good at solving simple formal tasks like mathematical calculations, like playing board games, card games, solving puzzles. These sort of things computers are very good at. Humans, we can also do it, but provided we take a lot more time and a lot more effort for us to be able to kind of do those things. But traditionally, computers have been better than humans at. Then you have something called expert tasks, right? Which is loosely put, you can think about it as the jobs that we all do, right? And we do 16 years, 18 years, 20 years of formal education to get there, right? If you want to be an engineer, a doctor, a chartered accountant, a lawyer, a radiologist, or whatever, then essentially you spend a number of years of formal education learning how to be that. And then we kind of pick up those skills to be able to do those jobs well. Traditionally, computers were not very good at it, but this is where today, a lot of machine learning sort of algorithms are making a headway in terms of slowly machines are getting good at some of these expert tasks, which traditionally, even 10 years ago, were largely out of the limits or out of the bounds of many of these computer systems. So that's the way to understand it, right? So typically, the so-called mundane tasks for humans, computers still find it very difficult. Even with all the advancements in machine learning, we're not yet there. At least we're not there at human capabilities. Okay. The expert tasks we're getting there. Machines are getting there very, very fast now, and that's why there is all this interest about machine learning competencies and engineers within the professional setups. Because now you're kind of seeing that these machines or these algorithms can do a lot of these sort of jobs as well as humans, if not better in some cases. So, that's where that whole tussle is. And I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing so much demand in the industry too for some of these skills as we kind of speak about. Hopefully it's making some sense again. Yeah, especially when I do this in India, I find it good to have this slide, just because I think a lot of people come from a software engineering, software programming background, and they have a better understanding of software programming than traditional statistics or mathematics. So how do you differentiate between traditional programming and machine learning? Let's just say a very simple thing, right? Let's look at the top one now. Don't focus on the bottom one, just focus on the top one. This is what traditional programming is, right? Now let's say you have a simple example of a bank where when you put money is credited to your account. When you take money out, the money is kind of debited, right? And given a set of transactions, you want to find out what is the balance at the end of the month, quarter, year, whatever. So you want to find out the balance. So how do you do it in traditional programming? It's very easy. You just feed in all the data. For example, I don't know, on 1st of May, I put in 100 rupees. On 2nd of May, I took out 30 rupees. On 3rd of May, I took out another 10 rupees. So whatever. So all the data, all the transactions. And then you also feed the rules to the computer, which is every time money is put in, credited, every time money is taken out, debited. Okay, so you've given all the data, you've given the rules, and you've asked the computer, go ahead and calculate my balance. And it's easy, right? That's what we do in traditional programming, whether you do it in in Java, in C, in Python, in any language that you can write it. It's not complex at all, 2 or 3 lines, and then you get an output. And this is what all traditional programming is. Now, what is machine learning? Machine learning is only useful when those rules are not known to you. If those rules are known to you, there's no point in using machine learning at all. I'll give you an example. Suppose I show you a cat, and I ask you to recognize it, you'll say it's a cat. If I show you a dog, you'll say it's a dog. But then if I ask you, how did you actually distinguish between these two? Tell me the rules. It's not that easy anymore, right? Because both have four legs, okay? 2 ears, 2 eyes, a mouth, a nose, fluffy ears, probably both can be hairy, both can have whiskers. There can be dogs the size of cats, and there are some cats the size of small dogs. So it kind of gets tricky. It's not easy for us. We are able to distinguish it in a subconscious manner, but we are not really, we can't really give you a set of rules to kind of describe how exactly you're doing it, right? It's very difficult to write those set of rules. We actually can't. If I show you a tomato and an apple, you can't touch it. Hopefully, you can just see it. Just by seeing it, you can easily distinguish this is a tomato and this is an apple. Both will be red, both will be whatever. But if you're asked to explain the exact rules, it gets very, very tricky. You can't. You don't exactly know how you can do that, but you can just do it. So in problems, and similarly in industrial cases, if you're asked to, if there are things around defect detection, if there are things like you're trying to predict sales, these sort of problems where the rules are not clearly known, you cannot really write down the exact rules, but you have some intuition towards it. In those sort of situations, machine learning works very well, because how does machine learning work? You feed it all the data like you previously did, but you don't feed the rules in now. You don't know the rules. So you feed in the output, which is you basically say, in the bank example, my starting balance was 10 rupees. I put in 20 rupees, my balance became 30. So you feed the two pieces of information. I put in 20, the balance is 30. I took 5 off, balance was 25. And then, I put another 10 more, the balance became something else. So you just feed the data and the output, the result of what happened due to feeding the data. And you don't feed in the rule because you don't know the rule. You are expecting the machine learning algorithm to come up with the rule set, which you can then later use to generalize to unknown data, right? And so basically that is what machine learning is used for. Machine learning can give you the rules present in a data set, if given the data and the output at each instance of the data. And by the way, this has a name. This type of learning is called supervised learning within machine learning, which is probably about 70-80% of all learning that goes on in the machine learning world anyway. So this is called supervision. You're kind of supervising by giving the output, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So in traditional programming, you give the rules and you get the output. In machine learning projects, you give the output and you get the rules. Now, the rules, of course, are not written in English like we humans would write. It is written in a set of real numbers as a mathematical equation. Because finally, computers can only understand numbers. They can only manipulate numbers. They cannot manipulate words, right? Computers can't manipulate words. They don't understand language. Even when you're feeding language, even when you're doing natural language processing, you have to convert the words and letters into numbers. Because a computer at the end of the day can only deal with numbers. Hopefully it clarified some very, very simple things about machine learning. Okay. Okay. So I wanted to also broadly give you a timeline view of how this has happened. Artificial intelligence, like I said, 1956 actually. So 50s, 60s, 70s, it was largely a lot of excitement. There were very, very small advancements, but people were very, very excited. People thought that they could solve all the problems in a couple of decades. Of course, that didn't happen. So 80s is when machine learning started to flourish. That's because data started to become more and more available, widely available. Yeah. Like I said, the key to machine learning is data. because it's a data-based learning approach, right? Like we saw in the last example too, you need to give it a lot of data and a lot of outputs. Only then it can learn the rules. So that's when machine learning began to flourish. I don't know your competence in some of these things, but the backpropagation algorithm, if you know what it is, if you don't, then don't bother. That's a key piece of algorithmic development that happened in the mid 80s by Professor Hinton, and that kind of set the stage. Then around 2012 to be precise, was the year when deep learning took over the world. When I said deep learning, it's basically neural networks, right? See, neural networks existed. Neural networks existed back right from 1950s. Okay, right from 1950s, the perceptron was a neural network architecture. Rosenblatt, he kind of designed it, and that was back in 50s. It existed, but these things never worked. These things never worked. One, because they didn't have enough data. Two, they didn't have enough compute. And three, till the mid 80s, the backpropagation algorithm was also key for this. So once we had all of these three key ingredients come in, and I think around 2010, it was Yoshio Bengio who kind of did the first ImageNet classification using something called LXNet, and that kind of changed the world, so to speak. I still remember that day precisely. You know, we were all reading that paper with awe and saying, "Oh my God, how is this even possible? How can this be like 80% accurate?" Okay, because that was unknown till that time. Even if you can get to somewhere like 60-65%, we used to think it was absolutely brilliant. So 80-85% sort of accuracies were unheard of in the field of neural networks. So when that happened in 2012, all hell broke loose, and now this is probably called the deep learning era in that sense, right? We're all doing neural networks now. Okay, so this is to give you just a timeline view of how everything works. And we're still in that era. We're still in the deep learning era. I think 2020s, maybe my thing is even 2030s will largely be deep learning. Maybe post that we may get to some level of some other different architectures that will probably take us beyond there. Okay, so we talked a little bit about data science. So let's talk a little bit about data scientist. Okay, so who is a data scientist? Data scientist, see, the first thing you have to understand is data science and data scientist, it's a multidisciplinary field. So what does that mean? You can come from any field and be a data scientist. That's the good part. The bad part, of course, is no one person will know everything. Yeah. So you'll have to choose your field, and we'll talk about what in this field will you be interested in. So typically, like I said, historically, and especially in the US, if you talk about it, a lot of people working in this field will come from either statistics or machine learning or some sort of neurocomputing or neurological sciences. Those are typically the fields from which people would be coming into this sort of a field of artificial. In fact, you will be surprised to know artificial intelligence papers for a long time were published under the philosophy section. So if you wanted to read AI papers or ML papers, they would not be under maths, they would not be under statistics, they would not be under computer science. They would actually be under philosophy. For a long time, that's where they were categorized. Now, of course, we are seeing more and more of them in computer science and mathematics journals. But traditionally, they were always present in philosophy journals. So in India, when I see a lot of people come into this, either from databases and data processing, business analytics, data mining, these sort of fields. So more, how do I say, software part of the data science world. And it's not like one is better than the other or one is more superior than the other. There is nothing like that. It needs all of these skills. So wherever you come from, you know some part and you don't know the other part, and that's the part that you try and learn. Okay. So So that's the beauty of this field. Everybody is a newbie, sort of. Okay, because this field is so broad and so diverse, and the backgrounds of people are so diverse that you don't really need to have to worry too much about it. But depending on where you come in from, your path will be slightly different. What you have to learn will be slightly different, and how you will get into it will be slightly different. So that's the key part of this. The one on the right is something that I always like to say, just because. So of course there are these hard skills. You need to know programming. You need to know Python. You need to know some of those frameworks. You need to know statistics, inferential statistics, probability, all of those things. But apart from that, you would also need to know a few things, right? So because good data scientists that I found in my experience are people who are generally curious, who just want to play around with data. Look at data firstly, and just like that, some sort of playful attitude with data. Not very rule-based in that sense. People who are willing to break the rules to kind of turn it around a little bit. So it's that sort of an attitude is important. Okay, so it's a soft skill, but it's a key skill if you want to succeed in this field. Then the other thing that I have just put in recently, this data gathering thing, because what I'm finding more and more now is some people who come into this field think their job is to write some sophisticated model and be done with it. That's not the case. Okay? You have to be able to do the end-to-end thing, which fundamentally means you need to be able to look at the data, collect the data, pre-process the data, and build data pipelines. So you need to have all of those data-related skills too, which is important to be a good data scientist. And that's something that some people nowadays are looking down upon. I don't know why, but it's completely wrong. The other thing that people miss out, of course, statistics. You need to know a decent amount of statistics. There's no getting away from that. The other thing is visualization that a lot of people miss out, right? Because the art of storytelling. How do you tell a story? And it's absolutely critical how you do this, because at the end of the day, the guy who's probably writing you a check, especially if you're in business scenarios, doesn't care and doesn't understand all of your great statistical techniques. He wants to understand the story, and as long as you can present a good story to him, the project goes through, and all of us have a job and a salary at the end of the month. So kind of that's an important part of the skill set too. I'm kind of saying a lot of things. I'm hoping it's making some sense to you guys. Now let's say, what are the sort of typical roles that you actually have? Okay, and this is where we can probably talk about, as a fresher, what are the roles you can get to and all of that. So if you really look at a data science as this universe, there are 4 different big blocks that I kind of see, 4 types of roles that I actually see here, right? There's the business side of the story, because finally, whatever we build has to solve a business problem. We are all in the corporate world, especially when we are talking about jobs. So we are for-profit corporate world. And then there is data, because like I keep saying, no data science without data. Then you got to do the actual model building. This is what a lot of people understand by when you say a data scientist, which is around the core model building exercise. And then the model management itself, right? How do you actually deploy, and how do you kind of ensure that these models are productionized? Let's go through each one of them, okay? On the business side, I think if you have some sort of, because this is probably an area where the industry is facing a huge problem today. Because what happens is, when you actually look at the very, very senior management, they all want to do machine learning. They all want to do data science, and they believe strongly that data science will give them a competitive edge in the marketplace. But the whole problem is Now that's at a very high level. Now, for example, if somebody comes in and says, use data science to increase my revenue, you can't do that, right? Because what does it even mean? What do you have to do? So you need somebody or some people in the organization who can bridge that gap, who can actually take that aspiration from the business, turn it into something concrete that actually a data scientist can work on and produce an output which will actually be useful to the business in achieving whatever they need to achieve. So this is a role, at least when I am running this company or I work with some other companies, I always found this role to be lacking. We don't have enough good people in this space. What are the skills it needs? Fundamentally, good communication skills, good understanding of at least some understanding of a business area or a sub area. A degree, like people who have degrees like MBAs may actually be better suited to this than probably who are more tech oriented degrees in that sense. So gotta be smart, think on your feet, excellent communication skills, speed is of the essence, gotta be very fast, and some understanding of a business area. A combination of these skills can get you, in those jobs very, very quickly. For a data science project, you need business analysts. The other ones, the functional analyst and the domain expert, those are just progressions of your career, right? As you get more and more senior, as I have seen in my experience, that's how they kind of transform themselves into. But the key role is still of a business analyst. On the data side, now this is the one that's probably, in terms of number of jobs, this is the area that will have the maximum number of jobs. Okay? Because every data science machine learning project, 60 to 70% of the effort is spent on data. Cleaning data, loading data, whatever, building pipelines for data and all of that. It's fundamentally got two roles, right? Data analysts and data engineers. So what's the difference? Data analyst is one who actually looks at the data and is able to make some quantitative judgments about the quality of the data or the usability of the data for your task at hand. For example, you want to build a credit credit decisioning model. So essentially, if you're a bank, you want to build a model. Once somebody comes to you and applies for a loan, you should be able to say, hey, do I want to approve his loan or do I want to reject his loan? If you want to build a model like that, then what sort of data you need, right? You need customer demographic data. When I say demographic data, you need details like their age, their gender, where do they live? Do they live in a rented house or in an own house? Or you need demographic details about the customer. You need transactional details about the customer, right? In terms of is he your customer? If he's been your customer, then what sort of customer has he been? If he has not been your customer, then maybe buy some data or have an understanding of how he has transacted with other banks. Has he defaulted on loans before? Things like that. And then you want some of his behavioral data, if you can, which is getting more and more important now in terms of his social media content or whatever. How does he actually behave? Where does he go does he go to vacations, I don't know, 3 times a year, 2 times a year, maybe once in 2 years? All of this data is important, right? Behavioral data. So it's a mishmash of all of this. So the data analyst is the person who looks how much of the data is internally available, even if it's available, is it fit for use and things like that. The key skills required here will be largely SQL skills, very, very good SQL skills. And really the excellence is of speed. Should be very, very fast. Because typically business data analysts, there's a lot of pressure on them to keep looking at multiple sets of data. So very fast, excellent SQL, and good presentation skills, So that's kind of what are the sort of top skills that I would put in a data analyst. Data engineer is one who actually builds those pipelines, right? If you have to move, I don't know, customer data from one system to another system for you to be able to build a model, then somebody has to kind of engineer and build the pipe. It's like a plumber, right? If you have to get water from place A to place B, finally you need somebody to build the water pipe. So that's what these guys do. So think about it like this: the data analyst, he kind of analyzes the water in the pipe, and the data engineer actually builds the pipe. So think about it like that. Maybe that helps you to think about a little bit. Data visualization, data architect. Data architect is like a much more senior who can actually architect complex data pipelines, right? Data engineer builds them, the data architect actually architects them. So that's just a question of a seniority roles and things like that. We come to model building now. Yeah, I think all of these people can be called data scientists, but what I say is when you're at an entry level, I would rather have you focus more on core statistical and operations research type skills, because those are the skills that are more given to entry level people. Because operations research, for example, is a field that is pretty mature. Optimization problems, right? You want to do a lot of most businesses. In fact, the bread and butter work of any data science group in any large organization is optimization problems, right? You want to figure out, I don't know, how many of these things should I build in this factory, or at what, if you're a retailer, at what price should I be selling these garments, or how much of discount should I be giving? If you're a bank, how much interest should I be giving this loan for? You know, all of these problems at the end of the day are just optimization problems, right? So optimization is a very big field in itself, but we typically talk about only convex optimization. So operations research is a very good field. It's a good mixture of statistics, mathematics, and some level of software programming. So it gets you grounded well. So I think that's an area that you guys, anybody who's interested in doing that field should probably look at. Then typically they become statisticians over a period of time, and then they become principal data scientists, chief data scientists, and things like that. Of course, there are, because now this area has got mushed up, there are a lot of companies that are also having very junior people and they're calling them data scientists and all that. And mostly they do Tableau and Power BI reporting and things like that. That's also happening. Okay. So I guess we have to add that too. So there are other types of data scientists, I guess, from the ones that I have been talking about, which is more about descriptive analytics, right? You're just doing a lot of reporting. The last one that I want to talk about is the whole model management one. This is the one that's actually, very few people actually take notice of this today. Traditionally, this has been a very academic discipline, right? So in that sense, what we've been doing is building these machine learning models for a one-use type situation, right? When I was working with Target, for example, the way this used to go was somebody from the business will come and tell me, hey, we have a large stock of I don't know, Ralph Lauren Polo white shirts from last season that didn't sell. Looking at how the sales patterns are, let's say for the Midwest region, can you tell me what is the right level of discount I should actually offer to cleanse the stock in 3 weeks? Okay, so I have like whatever 500,000 white shirts. I got to clear them off in 3 weeks in my 300 stores in the Midwest area. Tell me how much discounting should I be giving off on a week-by-week basis? Now, this is the question that somebody asks you, right? And then as a data scientist, your job is to try and use whatever statistics you have learned to actually create that model and to be able to see, hey, this is the optimum level of week by week discounts you should give. But the thing with this is this is a one-time thing. I do this and then I forget about it. Right? It's not like I'm not running this this model on a day-to-day basis. I'm not every day trying to do the same problem for 500,000 white shirts anymore. So it's a one-time problem. Deployment and model management is not an issue. I just do it one time, answer the question, and move on to the next question. But now what is happening is some of these machine learning models are getting deployed directly in production pipelines now. Right? In production software pipelines, you actually have ML algorithms. If you're using Google or if you're using any one of those Facebook apps or whatever else that you're using, all of them have machine learning algorithms straight within the pipelines. So that means they need to be deployed at scale with millions and millions of customers using it. And then they got to be optimized, right? You got to be able to use them on your mobile phones, to your tablets, to your laptops, to probably even smart TVs and things like that. So you got to be able to optimize these algorithms, deploy them at scale, and then over a period of time keep retraining them as the world around them changes. So this is not something that was traditionally done in the machine learning space. So there was no, or there is no, actually was no is the wrong question. There is not much talent available in this space. And it's a huge space, a lot of opportunities. What do you got to do in order to get a job here? Basically ML ops, right? Machine learning operations. It's now being called ML ops. It's probably the hottest thing in machine learning right now. So learn some of those ML ops. Fundamentally, you got to be good with at least one of the two big frameworks out in the game now for deep learning, TensorFlow or Torch or PyTorch. So either be good at PyTorch or be good with TensorFlow. Of course, the others are there, but nobody seems to be using them much. And then go ahead and learn the whole ML ops lifecycle with either TensorFlow Hub or PyTorch Hub, and there's that whole machine learning operations side. So to me, if you're looking out for an immediate job, data and model management are the better places to focus on. The model building takes more time. So what I suggest to a lot of people who come from a software background necessarily is to get into either data or model management, and over a period of time move into the core sort of model building type roles if you're still interested. For somebody who has more of communication flair and has an MBA degree and has some level of understanding of a particular business area or process, start looking at some, this is a good area to get into, some sort of starting business analyst type jobs. I hope that made some sense. I've spoken a lot. Okay, so I'll talk about a typical data scientist learning path. This is not the only learning path. I've just given you an example of how someone can go about doing this. So maybe start with learning Python well. I just said Python for Everybody by University of Michigan. I found that it's a free course. You don't get the degree if you do it free, but I think it's a degree. If you don't think the degree is that important, but you want the knowledge, then you can do it free on Coursera, I think. So it's a very good course with Python. Yeah, maybe you can do that. Then learn some sort of ML fundamentals from who else but Andrew Young's course. He's the god of all machine learning teaching. So learn it from his course. It's freely available on Stanford website. I think it's also freely available on YouTube and even on deeplearning.ai actually. Then next, get on to deep learning specialization by deeplearning.ai. This is again a very, very good course. You can do that. Probably will take you 3 months or so. Torch or TensorFlow, you can learn it using their own websites. You can go to tensorflow.org or torch.org, and there are enough tutorials and documentation and enough YouTube tutorials to learn that. But get the certification done, okay? It's because the industry is now demanding this certification. Then do the ML Ops, what I talked about, the ML Ops course by deeplearning.ai. If you do this, this will be a good starter pack to get into a data scientist type, junior data scientist type jobs. Similarly, if you want to get into the data side of it, go do an Azure or an AWS or a GCP data track. That will be a great way to start, get certified there. The job opportunities are there. Somebody wants to do Snowflake. Snowflake is very good too, because it's being used more and more to build some of these ML pipelines. So some sort of Snowflake certification is brilliant too. Guys, that's all that I had in terms of slideware. So if you have any questions, happy to answer.
A lot of information. Yeah, a lot of information. Yeah, I think you can ask any questions. With respect to any roles that Srinivas has shared. It's a fantastic update and fantastic session, Srinivas. So something is blocking the screen share. I think if you, that's what. Any questions on how to start a career, in data sciences? What are the steps you need to take? I think if you guys want to ask those questions, just ask the questions. We are not here to, as Srinivas Garu mentioned, we are just here to help you. So I would ask, how do I start a data scientist question? I'm just finishing my bachelor's in engineering. I'm not good at programming. So what do I do? Like that, ask some questions like that. We'll be happy to answer.
Yes, sir, in Coursera. Sir, can you please give AI a learning path? That's a very broad question, right? So I think it's a good question. So fundamentally, if you want to start into this field of artificial intelligence, what I would request you is, like, for the first step, like I said, go and I tell everybody, go and learn Andrew Young's course. Okay, go and see his YouTube lectures. Okay, there are about 130 of those YouTube lectures. They're all free. Each one is about 15-20 minutes. The first step that I will ask you to do is every week take one video of his for 4 or 5 days or 6 days. Okay, what that tells you is, once you do that, you will yourself have an understanding of where you stand. Are you enjoying those lectures? Are you able to understand what he's talking about, or is it completely at sea? It kind of gives you that good barometer, and then it also tells you the gaps in your mathematics and statistics understanding. See, we don't require a lot of complex math and stats. Don't get me wrong. As long as you have first year engineering level of linear algebra, first year engineering level of calculus, little bit of insight into multivariate calculus. Basically, it's your chain rule only. Okay? Basic calculus, basic linear algebra, basic probability theory. Okay? You don't need to get to measure theory and all the complex things. Basic probability theory. Some understanding of inferential statistics, which is all those p-values and t-test and f-test and chi-square test and all of that. If you have these, so that's what I'm saying. If you take the first 5 or 6 courses of Andrew Young, he'll talk about some of these things. So if you are able to relate with it, you're fine, you're fantastic. Just go ahead and do that. Okay. But if you are not, then it will tell you that you have to go back and refresh those mathematical concepts a little bit. Maybe spend 15 days a month to kind of refresh those concepts and get back. And how do you start? See, there are 2 ways to start. The big question a lot of people ask me is, should I formal certification? Should I pay a lot of money and do a formal certification? Or is self-study good enough? If you are trying to get a job, okay, if you're trying to get a job, I would say some amount of disciplined study is required. Okay. Now, but does that mean you have to spend 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs and go to a Great Learning or an Insofi or wherever and take the course? Not necessarily. I am not saying against it, but all I'm saying is not necessarily. You have to break it down. Okay. For example, like I said, one thing could be you do all of these Andrew Young's courses on YouTube for free itself. There is no money required. There is no nothing. And then you go and start working on some of those models on Kaggle or something like that, where you have those data sets available. So work on those concepts, do something, get to a decent score on Kaggle, use your own GitHub repository, and get your TensorFlow or Torch certification from the outside. And maybe you can also do one Azure or AWS type certification. That also helps. So if you're a self-disciplined sort of guy, you can do that and you can get a job. You don't need to go through that formal training course. But if you think you're not disciplined enough to do that, then you probably go ahead and enroll in one of those courses. See, it's all a question about you. There is no right way or right. Because I, for example, have never ever gone to a formal educational institution post my undergrad. The only degree I have is a BTech. Okay, that's it. I don't have any other degree. I have just self-learned over all these years, and that's absolutely fine. You know, you can do that and have a fantastic career. But the whole point is you need to do some certifications, at least in the initial phases, just so that employers believe you. Can we enter into the field at the age of 35? Absolutely. Absolutely, you can enter. In fact, let me tell you, I am right now about 47. I started working on vision only when I was about 32, 33 years old. Okay. I have done some machine learning work before that, but I didn't do anything with computer vision before that. So absolutely, don't even for a second think that somehow that's too high in age and you can't do that and all that. In fact, I see people who come in. I'll tell you an example of a guy. Okay? A guy who joined my company. He worked for 11 years in Cognizant. I won't give you his name though, but 11 years he was working in Cognizant as a validation engineer in their product engineering division. He had no idea of anything. Okay, so this guy used to pester me on a day-to-day basis. He learned machine learning. He did a few certifications. I gave him a job in my own company. Today, he worked with me for 3 years now. He has gone off to Microsoft now because he's transitioning. He's just resigned from my company. He's getting onto Microsoft now. He's moving on to Seattle actually now as a data scientist. So it's absolutely possible. So don't think like that. It's about finding the right mentor and putting in the efforts. That's all. Can any stream of engineering students can enter these areas then CSE? Absolutely. Anybody can enter. Only the effort will be higher. Because if you're a computer science engineer, you have already a better understanding of data structures and algorithms and some fundamental understanding of things like graph theory and all of that, which if you're coming from a non-CSE background, I guess you won't have it. But it's just a question of putting that effort in. Sir, what is your opinion on quantum computers? I think it's a reality. I think we got to get serious about it. Okay. So to be honest, I'm still studying. I don't claim to understand that field at any level of depth, but quantum machine learning algorithms will become a reality over the next 2-3 years. And before the end of this decade, if you're in machine learning, you will be expected to know quantum versions of at least some of the key machine learning algorithms. So it's coming. Yes, absolutely. There is no question about it. And you got to know it. And looking at the future, you got to focus on it. But I think you still need to get your fundamentals right. Person with normal degree can enter into the field. Yes, absolutely. If you have a BSc, see, if you have a BCom or something, I'll be a little more wary of saying it, honestly. Not that you can't, but you have to focus the effort on math a lot more. Because I know with somebody who was a marine biologist, and now he actually works as a data scientist, not with my company, but with a company that I work with. And he's a very, very good data scientist. So like I'm saying, It's not like you can't, but the only thing you got to understand is there, at least for people who come from a non-mathematical background, there'll be a little more effort required. Hopefully that is making sense. Anything else? I'm there. I am not going to say anything, guys. Okay. Trust me, I'm a friendly guy. Okay. I don't know what you're taking me as. Okay. I guess in that case, thank you. So YouTube channel name, please. What YouTube? Andrew NG. Okay, it is. Okay. Type Andrew NG. Machine learning. Stanford. So, thank you guys, and wish you all the very best. Feel free to reach me, I think through Vijay and through Task or something if you have any specific question. I may not be able to get back immediately, but I will get back in a day or two. Okay? So thanks, Shweta. Thanks, Vijay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable inputs.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vijay, sir.